And I still, you know, with the greatest respect to those guys, I don't think they knew who he was. That he makes this profound music. And then I heard this one track by him called Traveling Alone, which is the first track on the album that I thought was like nothing else he'd ever done.
Eric Clapton earned his famous nickname through dedication and hard work rather than it being simply handed to him. The name came from countless hours spent studying and learning from the blues masters who came before him. These were musicians who played with everything they had, pouring their souls into their instruments because music was their life. Clapton listened carefully to these legends, studied their techniques, and gradually learned to speak their musical language. What set Clapton apart was his approach to guitar playing. He never aimed to be the flashiest or loudest guitarist in the room. Instead, he wanted to capture something real and authentic. While other musicians focused on showing off their speed and technical abilities, Clapton went in a different direction. He dug deeper into the music, searching for single notes that could convey more emotion than a flurry of fast playing ever could. His musical choices were never about impressing anyone. He selected songs and albums that moved him emotionally, pieces that touched something raw inside him. Recordings that demonstrated what a guitar could truly express when played with honesty and feeling. Throughout his career, 7 specific albums served as his foundation. These records were more than just entertainment to him. They functioned as teachers, showing him the true path forward. They taught him when to hold back and when to let loose. Most importantly, they showed him that technical skill without genuine emotion and something meaningful to express was ultimately hollow. These albums became his guides through the often difficult journey of becoming a true blues musician. The first album that deeply affected Clapton was Freddie King's release from 1961. This record was purely instrumental, with no vocals to distract from the guitar work. For Clapton, hearing Freddie King was like experiencing electricity running through his fingers. The album had a calming effect on him, almost like medicine for his soul. Freddie King played electric blues using both a pick and his fingers, creating a thick, aggressive sound that felt completely alive and immediate. Young Clapton played this record over and over, trying to understand what made it so special. Freddie King never wasted a single note. Every bend of the strings had meaning. Every attack had clear intention behind it. One particular song on the album became like a sacred text that Clapton studied endlessly. He noticed how Freddie's guitar could growl menacingly in one moment, then soar beautifully in the next. The guitar could be gentle and then suddenly violent, all within the same musical phrase. This was not just background music you could ignore. It was like listening to a deep conversation between a man and his instrument, and Clapton desperately wanted to join that conversation. What really captured Clapton's attention was the energy in Freddie King's playing. It sounded like Freddie was genuinely enjoying himself, having fun with the music, but underneath that joy was extremely serious technical skill. He could play fast passages that never felt rushed or out of control. His slow string bends seemed to make time itself stop. Young Clapton was still just a teenager practicing in his bedroom when he discovered this album, but it showed him what was truly possible with a guitar. It taught him that the goal was not just to play blues music, but to actually become the blues, to embody it completely. Years later, when Clapton played with other musicians, you could hear Freddie King's influence pouring out of his amplifier in those sharp, singing lead lines and confident attacks. The second major influence came from Robert Johnson. When Clapton discovered Robert Johnson's compilation in 1961, it actually frightened him, though not in a negative way. It was the kind of fear that comes from encountering something profound and important. Johnson's voice sounded like it emerged from somewhere dark and mysterious. His guitar playing seemed impossible because it sounded like he was playing multiple parts simultaneously. The bass line, rhythm, and lead melody were all woven together in ways that should not have worked, yet somehow they did, perfectly. These recordings were old and scratchy, made in hotel rooms back in 1936 and 37. But even through the surface noise and poor recording quality, Clapton heard something timeless and true. One song felt like a man standing at a crossroads facing a crucial decision. Another moved with a sense of dread mixed with strange beauty. Johnson sang about pain as if he had become comfortable with it, as if he had faced down his demons and survived to tell the story. What haunted Clapton most deeply was the profound loneliness in these recordings. It was just one man with one guitar, carrying the weight of the entire world. There was no band to provide support or hide behind, no opportunity for second takes. Johnson had to get everything right in a single performance or it would be lost forever. That intense pressure created something incredibly precious. Clapton heard this and understood what authentic blues really meant. It was not about showing off or playing fast. It was about survival, about expressing something so essential that it had to come out through music. The third album that shaped Clapton was a live recording from 1964. Clapton called it the greatest live blues album ever made. It captured a performance at a theater in Chicago, and listening to it, you can understand why Clapton never stopped talking about its importance. The crowd's excitement was palpable. The guitar sang with incredible expressiveness, and for the duration of the performance, everything else in the world seemed to disappear. This was not merely a concert, it felt more like a religious experience, with the performer serving as a preacher, delivering his message through his guitar. What amazed Clapton was the space between the notes. The guitarist didn't need to play rapidly, he played intelligently. Every note had room to breathe and ring out, making you anticipate what would come next. One song unfolded like a conversation where the performer shared his pain with the audience, and they completely understood and connected with it.
Clapton learned that silence was actually part of the solo, that sometimes choosing not to play was the bravest and most effective choice a musician could make. The guitarist controlled the entire crowd with just his instrument and his presence. He made it look effortless, but Clapton recognized the decades of practice and skill disguised as casual brilliance. The way the strings were bent made them seem to cry and laugh within the same musical phrase. The tone was pure, clean, and absolutely unique. Nobody else sounded quite like that. The fourth influential album came as a surprise to Clapton. When it was released in 1964, it confused many listeners. He was a musician famous for electric Chicago blues suddenly playing acoustic. He sat down with just a guitar and harmonica, playing quietly. People expected thunder, but instead he gave them rain, gentle and steady, yet impossible to ignore. Clapton heard it and realized that power did not always require volume. This musician had essentially invented electric blues. He was the person who plugged in and made the world shake with his sound, so when he unplugged his guitar, people paid even closer attention. The song sounded both ancient and fresh at the same time. His voice was deep and mesmerizing. His guitar playing was spare and patient, yet somehow more powerful than any screaming solo could be. Clapton loved that this musician did not need special effects or amplification to sound commanding. His presence alone filled the room. His timing was absolutely perfect, with every note landing exactly where it needed to be. The fifth album that changed Clapton's direction came out in 1968. When he heard it, his entire approach shifted. The band behind this record did not sound like anyone else. They did not try to be flashy or excessively loud. They simply played like five friends gathered around a fire, telling stories that genuinely mattered. The guitar playing did not scream for attention, but rather whispered. The drums sounded like human heartbeats. The vocals conveyed the weight of lived experience. Clapton heard all of this and realized he had been shouting when he should have been speaking normally. The songs unfolded like parables or stories with deeper meanings. The band did not show off their abilities. They served the songs themselves. Every instrument occupied its proper place in the mix, with no one stepping on anyone else. Clapton, who had been playing the role of guitar hero, suddenly wanted to disappear into music like this, where individual ego died so the song could truly live. What really struck Clapton was the authenticity. The band sounded genuine and lived in, like finding something real and dusty in an old basement. They mixed rock, country, blues, gospel, and folk music into something that felt both brand new and ancient at the same time. There were no gimmicks or cheap tricks, just 5 musicians who completely trusted each other. Clapton was growing tired of being worshipped as a guitar god. He wanted to be a real musician instead. This album helped end one phase of his career and begin another. It taught him that less could be more, that empty space mattered, and that serving the song was the highest calling for any musician. The 6th album terrified Eric Clapton, but in the best way possible. When it dropped in 1967, it did not just change how people thought about guitar playing, it completely destroyed the old rules and built new ones from scratch. Clapton had been called a guitar god by fans and critics. Then he heard this album and realized he had only been playing in the shallow end of the pool. This guitarist had jumped into the deep ocean and was swimming with creatures nobody knew existed. This musician did not simply play the guitar. He attacked it, loved it, tortured it, and made it sing in languages that should not have been possible. The song sounded like the future invading the present moment. The technique was otherworldly, but what mattered even more was the pure imagination. This guitarist used the recording studio itself as an instrument. He played guitar parts backwards, used feedback as melody, and turned distortion into something beautiful. He made mistakes sound completely intentional, and intentional choices sound like happy accidents. Clapton never tried to copy this style because he knew he couldn't. Nobody could. But hearing this album pushed him to find his own unique voice instead of just imitating his heroes. It showed Clapton that the guitar had no real limits, only the limitations that players placed on themselves, and even those could be broken through with enough creativity and courage. The final album, and perhaps the most important, came out in 1959. When Clapton first heard it, something deep in his chest responded powerfully. The main vocalist's voice was huge, terrifying, and completely human all at once. He sounded like someone wrestling with inner demons and winning. The guitar playing was simple yet devastating. This was not just music for entertainment. This was survival, transformed into sound. The songs hypnotized listeners with repeated riffs played into infinity. The vocalist did not sing pretty melodies. He sang truth. His voice growled and howled and rumbled like thunder, deciding whether to strike. Clapton heard that raw power and knew this was exactly what he had been searching for. Not perfection, but honesty. What Clapton loved most was that this musician didn't care about being liked or popular. He cared about being real and authentic. The recordings were rough, captured in small studios with minimal production, but through that rawness came something absolutely pure. The vocalist's presence dominated every single second of the recordings. You believed every word he sang because he had clearly lived through everything he described. This was not a performance or an act. This was testimony, bearing witness to real-life experience. Eric Clapton never stopped being a student of the blues. These 7 albums taught him everything essential about music and life. They showed him that technical ability means nothing without soul behind it. Speed means nothing without proper use of space and silence. Fame and recognition mean nothing without truth and authenticity. Clapton's guitar sang the way it did because these albums taught him how to make it speak. They gave him a foundation that supported his entire career, showing him that the blues is not about how you play, but why you play. The mission they gave him was simple yet profound. Play like your life depends on it, because, in the most important ways, it does.